All right, thank you and welcome back today to the Reimagine Tomorrow webinar. NetElixir is proud to be joined by Jerry Nguyen, who is a professor at Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania. He'll be presenting the opportunities in a time of crisis. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind our audience that if you have any questions during the webinar, you can submit them at any time via the chat box or by submitting your questions through the Q&A button. If you are more comfortable discussing offline, you can email us at any time at shareinsights@netelixir.com or submit your questions in the quick survey that will appear on your screen once the presentation concludes. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second Reimagine Tomorrow webinar. My name is Heather Dessette, and I am NetElixir's Event Marketing Manager. Before we dive into today's presentation, I wanted to quickly share with you a little bit about who we are. For those of you unfamiliar with NetElixir, NetElixir is a digital retail marketing agency that works with brands around the globe. We help retail brands find and engage high-value customers. We do so through an array of our digital marketing solutions listed here. And NetElixir is proud to be premier partners with UPS, Google, Microsoft, Bing, and Facebook. Below, you can see a list of our amazing clients that we have the privilege of working with. As you can see, their industries vary anywhere from food to fashion. So next, I want to remind you again, if you have questions at any time during this presentation, you could submit them through the Q&A or the chat box. If you are more comfortable discussing offline, just email us at shareinsights@netelixir.com. And also during the presentation, once we get to the 5th guideline, we will be accepting questions. So feel free to keep your questions coming. All right, I'm pleased to welcome Udayan Bose, who is NetElixir's founder and CEO. Udayan?
Thank you very much, Heather. Before I start off, I wanted to just introduce the concept of Reimagine Tomorrow lecture series or talk series. As we really all navigate through these uncertain times together, we need more than just real data. I mean, we need knowledge that inspires us to look forward to the future and thought leadership experience that really sparks fresh ideas. More importantly, a broader world view and a lot of genius to really help us connecting the dots, because that's where I think connecting the dots is what is required in very uncertain and other crazy times like this. This webinar series, where this is the second episode of the webinar series. We had the last one on 12th of May, where we had Professor Anindya Ghosh from NYU Stern join in. The goal is to bring in some of the leading thought leaders worldwide and really sort of get us thinking about tomorrow as to how essentially things would be. Because we firmly believe that once we start to begin to believe that we will get through this, we will really have an improved tomorrow when we do. So with that, today's speaker, I have tremendous amount of privilege introducing is Professor Jerry Nguyen. So I will start with a quick anecdote, and that's where I mean, you can say that I have really idolized Jerry for a very long time. Way back in 1996, when I was in my MBA program in India, we had this course in industrial marketing, and Jerry had written a fabulous book way back. I think it was your first book, Jerry, if I'm not wrong, in 1966, if I'm not wrong as well, which became our curriculum book as well. So since then, it's just an unbelievable honor to welcome Jerry to today's presentation session. I'm pretty sure many of you may have already really heard Jerry and probably have followed his works as well. He also presented at our X equals Experience annual event last year as well, where he conducted an absolutely incredibly thought-provoking workshop on innovation. He joined Wharton in 1967 and is currently the Lauder Professor Emeritus of Marketing at Wharton. Jerry also founded the Wharton think tank, the SEI Center for Advanced Studies in Management, and ran it for 3 decades. And in 2017, Jerry was inducted to the AMA's Marketing Hall of Fame. So in all my humility, I can't really think of people of this, any thought leader of the stature of Jerry, who really I have had really the good opportunity of interacting with. So it's really a privilege, Jerry. Welcome. Welcome to the knowledge community, the Knowledge Inspires community. Before I hand over to Jerry, I wanted to also introduce that this is a series that we started, as I mentioned, last month. And next month, I have the privilege of introducing another Wharton professor, whose book also I had studied during my MBA class. Professor George Day. And those of you who are interested in joining, it will be on July 9th at 2 p.m. the same time. You can sign up using that URL netelixir.com/experience. But without further ado, let me have the privilege of handing over the baton to Professor Jerry Wind. His topic today is opportunities in the time of crisis. Jerry, I'll sort of share the remote access, remote control to you so that you can really take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me basically first welcome you here and recognize that our heart goes to those who are suffering from the coronavirus and the second virus that's infecting now the US, that as a result of the senseless killing of George Floyd. The focus of our session today is primarily on what opportunities can we create at a time of crisis. We're just experiencing life after what I call the Ide of March, the eve of shifting to the new reality of life, which will be after the coronavirus. And let's just briefly kind of summarize and review what we are experiencing. Over 4 billion people have asked to stay at home. Work from home is now by most companies. Shift to online learning by all schools and universities. Closing of most retail establishments. Social distancing. The area of digital relationship and communication. Disruption of all air travel. Disruption of global supply chains. Massive unemployment. Closing of all cultural institutions, sports, and other public events, collapse of stock prices. Can we turn to the next page, please?
Sure.
All this sounds pretty daunting, but let's remember that crisis offers opportunities. In Chinese, the two characters comprise crisis is a combination of danger and opportunity. John D. Rockefeller's famous quote was, "I always try to turn every disaster into an opportunity." And Winston Churchill is believed to have said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." Can move forward, please? So primarily, I would like to suggest that there are three things that we should do at time of crisis. Number one, obviously coping and surviving the crisis. Two, try to identify and capture opportunities that the crisis offers. And three, anticipate and prepare for the next crisis. The focus today will be primarily on capturing the opportunities, but at the same time, I believe that it will also help us with the other two things that we have to do at the same time. So if we can move forward, please. And if we can move one more, please. What I would like to explore with you then is 10 guidelines for discovering and creating opportunities. And the first one and most critical is really the need to change our mental models. The fundamental requirement for us to succeed in today's environment is to view the current situation not as a short-term necessary evil that we would just try to let go and immediately go back to the good old days, but rather as an opportunity to rethink what we're doing. And just think about this. Consider, for example, the school and universities. They all were forced to move into digital online learning. For them to go back after the crisis and go ignore the experience now with online learning is really crazy. Or think about companies. Most companies now have very effectively succeeded in working from home. After the crisis, to go back and suggest, let's just go back to work and forget the experience we had from working from home is crazy. It doesn't make any sense. What we want to do is we want to rethink work environment, the workplace, and how do we incorporate in the new reality the experience we gained here. Or think about what all organizations are doing now, which is successfully communicating online. Kind of the conference we are having now, kind of using Zoom, or using WebEx, or using any of the other approaches. Again, after the crisis, to go back to the old way of communicating and even selling and forgetting the experience and the opportunity to try to integrate with the old approach and digital interaction does not make any sense. And similarly, with respect to the second virus that I mentioned in the beginning, for us to go back and not to try to learn the lessons of the current crisis we have in terms of the enormous impact and damage to our society of racism and bigotry and senseless killing. This does not make sense. It's an opportunity for us to try to rethink what do we do in our own organizations to try to make sure that we don't have or practice racism, that we are basically addressing the fundamental issues that face us as society, and we have the right values for our company. So the suggestion here is this is the opportunity to fundamental change our mental models and create it based on the advantages and the lessons we learned from the current crisis. If we can move to the next slide, please. The obvious need that all of us had is to transfer as fast as possible to a digital environment. Some had to do it faster than others, some did it better than others, but the reality is we have to continue speeding up our digital transformation, and most importantly, the digital infrastructure, and being able to do it in a way that will accommodate the needed new technology, new interaction, new expectations from this. Because some companies have done amazing jobs in this area, and this will become now the standard that all companies have to start looking at. So if we can move to the third slide, please. And here we would like primarily to create new opportunities to leverage the crisis. And consider, for example, the following. Think about Zoom. What Zoom has done is they realize that people are now stuck in specific environment. You see the background of the room in which I'm sitting in. But what Zoom did, and there are now also other new startups that are providing this service, they created backgrounds that you can use during your Zoom call. Think about another example. Carlo Ratti, famous architect, designed an intensive care pod within a shipping container for hospitals called Cura, an open source design for emergency COVID-19 hospitals. A great opportunity given the shortage that we have with hospitals and with emergency equipment. Think about your own business and ask the question, what are the opportunities that the current crisis offer for you, dealing with your capabilities, with your customers, with the environment you're dealing with? And some of the companies that actually transformed, for example, car companies that moved into creating ventilators, other companies that move into the production, change the production to accommodate the needs for masks or other medical experience. These are short-term, but some of them can be actually long-term opportunities as well. And we have to think about both the immediate need and as well as future needs. We can move to the next slide, please. The fourth area is critical. This is an opportunity, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to re-examine your talent strategy. In most organizations, you have a normal curve in terms of the talent distribution of the people you have. The people at the bottom of the talent distribution, you have to examine carefully the opportunity for upgrading them. Can they improve? Can they meet the needs for the 21st century competencies that your organization needs? If they can, great. Let's focus on upgrading their skills. But if not, that's the time to replace them. But most critical at this time, there is a new opportunity here for those of you who are not doing it to engage with open innovation and open talent. And let me explain it briefly for those of you who are not familiar with this. Imagine software development. In software development, it's well known that the difference in productivity between the top talent, top software developers and the average is about 10x. They're 10 times more productive. And those people, the top talent, are rarely interested in working for regular companies. They may be interested in working for NASA or Google or some of the other exotic companies, but will they be interested in working for your company? The answer is most likely not. And many of them, if they don't want to work for the top companies, they're interested in being individual, independent. They are part of what's called today the gig economy. And there are companies that are aggregating this talent, like a company called Top Coder that has over 1 million top coders as part of their network. And if you need specific job, you send the request to them, they send it to their network, and they are coming up with solutions. You know, sometimes they may have hundreds of people who will compete on a given area, and you are getting the best solution, and you're paying only for the results. Now, why is this so critical? There is a fascinating finding of thousands of these cases of open innovation that show that the further the discipline of the problem solver from the discipline of the problem, the higher the likelihood of solution. Which means if a medical problem company like Eli Lilly and many of the others that are using open innovation have a medical problem, it is not the medical experts in the networks of open innovation that are likely to solve the problem, but rather people from other disciplines. And in general, you have to realize the difficult reality that the best talent in the world to solve your problems is probably not part of your company. That you don't have all the talent in the world in your company, but there is a huge opportunity to capture open innovation, open talent outside. If you look at NASA, for example, go on their website and you'll see that many of the challenges facing NASA are being solved by open innovation, by them creating competitions that allow them to identify the best talent in the world to solve their specific problem. And remember again, you're just paying for the results. In general, there is a recent study conducted on the impact of open innovation. They found out in over 1,000 studies that they have done that in general, it is 4 times faster, 4x, and 8 times, 8x cheaper than internal talent for solving problems. I know that emotionally for every one of you, it's probably very difficult to fire talent, to change the talent strategy, but this is a must. And the current crisis offers a unique opportunity to try to do it. If we can move to the next item, please. And here the suggestion is to, in order to take advantage of enormous opportunities for mergers and acquisitions, or even acquiring group of talented individuals, before we run to do it, because we can get them at bargain prices, let's pause for a minute and try to undertake an idealized design process that will help us identify what do we really want to accomplish? What is really our vision? What's our objective? Think forward, 5, 10 years out and say, what type of company do you want to be? What type of legacy do you want to leave? And once you do it, and there is a process for doing it, I'll share with you in a minute, a very simple process you can start, then it will give you guidelines and help you identify whether this bargain opportunity of a merger that you have now makes sense for you to do or not. Now, the simple procedure for idealized design is imagine the time horizon that you're interested in, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Imagine an award that you want to get. What is the most, kind of the desired award that you would like to get? The Nobel Prize, the most innovative company in the world. What is the award you're trying to get? Then write down the headline of a story, let's say in your favorite publication, whether it will be the Wall Street Journal, whether it be The Economist, whether it will be Art in America, you select the publication. Write the headline for you getting the award. What is the award you got? And what is the headline? And then write at least the 3 major reasons that you got the award. If you do it, this will give you the guideline for creating a vision for your organization, will help you identify what are the objective you want to accomplish, will help you even identify milestones toward the objective, and create the foundation for a strategy. Once you have it, then you can evaluate any acquisition opportunity against it and ask the question, does it make sense for us to continue with this acquisition or not? Let me stop here because we thought that we're trying to break the presentation of 10 area and answer any questions you have concerning those 5 first guidelines that I'm suggesting.
So Jerry, I think we have got a couple of questions, but I'll start with my question to you first, Jerry. You talk about a very unique mindset which is required to tide through such times, right? So do the smaller companies which lack structure have really an inherent advantage compared to the larger organizations where any decision making or any changes or any experimentation may take a longer time? Because as we know that in times like this, in the frontline workers probably are getting most exposed as to what is really changing on a day-to-day basis. So what would your thought be on that? So do smaller organizations have an access, or can the larger organizations compete as well?
I think it's a great question. And you're putting your finger on important factor here for success, determinant for success. One is being close to the customer, being close to the market, understanding what's happening out there. You identified also a second critical criteria, which is the need for agility, need for moving fast. But your conclusion, which was, or the question driven by size of organization, I am not sure that I agree with. And the reason I don't agree is because there are large organizations that are amazing. They have agile structure, agile processes, they have very innovative leadership, and they can actually respond very effectively. Also keep in mind that large organizations are typically divided into many smaller units, different business units. So if you're dealing with different business units, it's quite likely in a large organization that one of the business units will have an amazing president that is really up on it and agile and move, and they will do an amazing job. And the large organization, if they're agile and have the right leadership, they have the resources that allow them to implement things effectively. So I'm not sure this is really a function of the size of the organization. I think the key to your question is to make sure that the organization has the right leadership, the right agility, and we'll talk about the need for organizational architecture to create that agility and the right mindset to be able to listen to the customer, be open to hearing what's happening in the marketplace, as opposed to being an internally driven organization.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jerry. Jerry, I'll just sort of start with the audience questions. I mean, the first question is, do you think we will ever go back to a normal 9-to-5 work week, or has COVID completely changed this idea?
I believe that most enlightened organizations will change their work concept. They'll change the structure of work. They'll change the workplace, and they will not go to 9-to-5. There are unique situations where it may require to be 9-to-5, but to miss the opportunity of people working from home, moving toward virtual organization, where you can actually allow people to work whenever convenient for them. And also work, ideally take it to the next level, work on things they are passionate about. Imagine the strengths and power when you have people working on what they are really passionate about in terms of the output and productivity and impact that they will have. And I think what the current environment offers us an opportunity to rethink the whole notion of work and work structure, provide people greater opportunity for flexibility to decide how they want to work, when do they want to work, what is the best way for them to interact with others to make the work happen.
Very interesting. Jerry, the next question. What innovations from coronavirus do you think will have a lasting impact on our society beyond remote learning and manufacturing design? Great question. Yeah.
I think the fundamental change will be company realizing that they have an opportunity to reimagine who they are. There are a number of studies about, especially McKinsey is running some and other organizations, on what's consumer sentiment during the crisis. And one of the major findings of many of these studies show that consumers take away the need for reflecting on their life. Why are we doing it? You know, do we really have to travel so much? Do we really have to do X, Y, and Z? So it's an opportunity. The crisis is so strong, such amazing global impact that it's really opportunity for people individually to reflect, why are we doing it? And it's an opportunity for organizations to reflect, why are we doing what we're doing? How are we doing it? Can we do it better? That's the reason my first point was the need to challenge your current mental model. That's the reason I suggested to go, before you rush into specific thing, do an idealized design, reflect, and ask the question, who do you want to be? So to me, this is the fundamental change that will govern everything. I think that the second virus that we're dealing with now also is giving people kind of a opportunity to pause and reflect and ask the question, how do we really deal with such a cancer of racism and bigotry? How do we address this issue? And then I think in each industry, in each specific area, we'll start seeing impact. Think about medicine. You know, telemedicine is becoming now a part of the practice. You know, telediagnostic, you know, kind of. So we're not going to go back without having this now as an integral part of the new practice of medicine. So in every given domain, I think you'll see some implications, but there's some general ones, like what I mentioned before in terms of new mode of communication, new mode of selling, including digital. This probably will be across all industries. So you'll have both in impact within industries, and then you have impact across industries that you have here.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jerry. Let me continue with the questions, and we'll probably have two more questions and sort of move on. How do we encourage open innovation in a small company at every level of employees, not just the management? I mean, how can we really expand it to all the different levels within the company, this concept of open innovation?
Great question. And we can spend probably the rest of the 24 hours just discussing this in terms of how do you enhance innovation in any company, whether it's small or large. I think part of it is the realization that innovation is the responsibility of everyone. Everyone should basically ask the question, whatever you're doing, can I do it better? You know, are there better ways of doing it? Should I do what I'm doing? You know, reflect. Are we doing, you know, the theme of the quality movement of the 80s, which was, are we doing the right thing right? Is still something that every individual should ask the question. Why are we doing, you know, and I'll talk about this in one of the other guidelines I'm suggesting in terms of assessing what the company is doing in order to generate the revenue so they can experiment with new things. But primarily, most organizations are doing things that at one time were needed, and there's basically no need for doing them anymore. Things that were done by hand that can be automated, things that there's no reason for doing anymore, things that basically you can avoid because every one of the units of the organization is doing it, and there's huge repetition, and you can save enormous amount of money by avoiding some of this duplication and repetition of activities. So I think there is a lot that can be done to try to encourage everyone in the organization to take responsibility of improving what they're doing, improving their job. It requires more trust of the employees in terms of empowering them. It requires also in terms of including almost in the job description of everyone, regardless what the job is, even the janitor. How can you do your job more effectively? Don't just do a robotic continuation of what you've done in the past. Can it be done better? You know, is the job still required? What can you do with this? So I think a lot of it depends to the whole concept of employment. What is our relation with the employees? How do we create the processes, the culture, as well as the incentive system to try to encourage everyone to innovate? And I'll talk about this again when I talk about my last guideline, which is primarily focusing on experimentation. And so this will complete the question, then the answer at that time.
So Jenny, a couple of more questions. Al asks, would you not agree that nimbleness in an organization is a significant advantage in times like this, where the context is changing? Has nimbleness become the number one differentiator, probably? I don't know, advantage point.
I lost you for some, you lost a little bit. Can you repeat the question in the beginning?
The question was, would you not agree that nimbleness or agility in an organization is a significant advantage in times like this, where the context is changing?
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Agility is absolutely critical, but to achieve agility, you have to focus and work on the entire organizational architecture. It requires implication to the culture and values, to the processes, to the structure, to the technology you're using, for the people, the type of people you have, the competence you're developing, the nature of the people, to the, if you're dealing with physical spaces, for the facilities, the way the facilities are organized, to the business model that you have, to the revenue model that you have, to the incentives and compensation system that you have. All of them contribute to the ability of organization to be agile. So yeah, absolutely. But agility is much more than just adapting to agile technology in the kind of the software development area or technology area, and I'll follow the becoming an agile development facility. We're talking about we need agile organizations, and you have to work on the entire organizational architecture.
Excellent. Parag is asking, how will consumer behavior change during these times? How will health and hygiene play into the shopping experience? What would be the new normal, as it is being said these days, look like in terms of health and hygiene and the consumer behavior change? What is your thought on that?
Great question. So as I mentioned before, briefly, there are continuous surveys that are going on. And if you'll follow, McKinsey is the one who's been most consistent. They've been doing it globally. So you can go on their website and try to follow their results. They're reporting almost like weekly sentiment in many countries around the world. In general, the understanding the consumer is becoming critical. What we know so far from the various surveys of consumer sentiment in the last few months suggests the following. There are going to be adaptability and to new mode of behavior. Consumers will adapt to new modes of behavior. They are now getting used to buying online. This is not going to disappear. They're going to continue buying online. If stores, retailers want to get them to the store, they'll have to change the concept of the store. They'll have to start creating unique experiences that will justify for people to come to the store. In addition to addressing fundamental things, such as the hygiene requirement for a store, for social distancing in the store, you know, kind of all the characteristics that you would expect, require people, if they're doing the opening now, to require people to come with masks. Ideally, have ability to test people before they enter the store. So you talk about some necessary things, but then once you meet those necessary things that will make people comfortable going to the store, you have to give a reason for coming. Why should I go if I can order it online? Why should I go to a restaurant if I can order this online, or I can basically cook at home and just get a product, or go pick it up or have it delivered? What is the unique experience you're creating? So consumer behavior is basically they're adapting to a new reality, and to try to go then back after the crisis to the assumption that they may go back and ignore the experience now during those moments of trial is crazy. We should basically make sure that we realize the fact consumer behavior is never going to be the same. There's some of the fundamental requirement and motivations are there, but this will change given the experience they just had. In today's environment, short term, people are still very concerned. There's still a huge amount of fear, primarily health, and then there's also fear of economic reality. Look at the huge number of unemployed people. So there's an enormous amount of uncertainty. This has led to a situation that most of the surveys suggesting that consumers are going to reduce significantly their purchase of discretionary items, and that they are going to delay significant purchases. So and some of the forecasts in terms of time for full recovery goes as long as 4 to 8 years. So we're not talking about full economic recovery of the country, in the short term. We're talking about really 4 to 8 years. And this is the reason for this wide range of 4 to 8 years is because of the different assumptions underlying it. Is there going, for example, going to be effective testing? Is there going to be effective vaccine? Variety of assumptions around this. What about government support and so on? So I think that what we have to do is we have to realize the consumer behavior is never going to be the same. So we cannot assume as what we thought we knew about consumers before the crisis. We have to monitor the changes out there, and we have to be dynamic and move with them. We need agility in our whole approach to dealing with the consumers and try to anticipate what their needs will be in the new environment and start developing different scenarios. So I think any type of planning should basically take into account what are the scenarios we're planning under in terms of the assumption of the health recovery, how fast this will be, and how fast will be the economic recovery.
Understood. Great. We have one more question, but I think Jerry will sort of come to that at the end. Why don't we move on? But this is the question we'll start with.
If you move to the next slide, will be great.
Yes, absolutely.
So the next guideline is the need to switch from the traditional shareholder-focused organization to a stakeholder-focused organization. And very importantly, the last sentence on this slide, to engage your stakeholders effectively. Now, the switch from shareholder to a stakeholder has been around for a while. There is the B Corporation. There have been efforts by a number of enlightened CEOs to suggest that they are as concerned about meeting the objective of their employees, the objective of the consumers, and meeting the needs of society, especially having a positive social impact. And that's as important as maximizing the long-term shareholder value. So I think the move toward a stakeholder orientation that had its orientation, a few years back, but now getting, because of the digital divide, the economic divide in the country, it's getting greater urgency with even calls for rethinking capitalism. I think it's moving us toward the new reality of having to address the stakeholder focus and not only shareholder focus. This gives a much greater weight to employees, much greater weight to consumers, much greater weight to other partners involved, distributors and others that you are dealing with as part of your network. And very importantly, asking the question, are you having a positive social impact on society? Realizing governments are not going to solve our problem. What can you do as an organization to help address the needs of society? And a critical element of this is the need to engage the stakeholder and especially your customers. And this is critical. There's a lot of research that shows that based on prior crisis events that happened, many of them not as severe as the one we're going now through, but the general finding from all of these studies show that if during a crisis you continue to engage your consumers by continuing to advertise the brand, to advertise in a meaningful, relevant way to the brand, your likelihood of success after the crisis are significantly higher than those organizations that shut down and stopped communicating with their customers. So it's really critical to use this opportunity to engage and enrich your engagement with your customers, because this will pay kind of huge dividends after the crisis. And you can see it. You can see it was in the world of art museums and cultural institutions, where some organizations are doing an amazing job. Think about the Metropolitan Opera that had about a month ago had a global gala with over 40 opera singers, which was an amazing 3-hour performance and engaged and strengthened enormously kind of opera lovers and their loyalty and actually almost love, I was kind of hesitant with the word, but almost love to the Metropolitan Opera and what they have done. Look at the art organizations such as the Barnes Institute in Philadelphia or the Getty Museum that develop very innovative approaches to engage in a relative way their audiences, and amazing response compared to other organizations that are silent, are not doing anything. And the same thing actually applies for today, for the crisis we've had in the last few days. There are amazing responses from many organizations, universities and others were responding to older audiences in terms of their reaction to the senseless killing of George Floyd and to what happened as a result of this, and suggesting not only sympathy with this, but actually ideas, some action that they would like to take as a result of this. So Penn, for example, our president just sent a note yesterday that they're initiating a number of projects, dedicating about $2 million for 3 project areas that try to address the problems of racism in the country. So I think these are the type of organizations that I think will succeed in the future. And we have to look at the crisis today, the dual crisis we have, as a huge opportunity to try to shift us effectively into a stakeholder orientation. Can we move to the next item, please?
Absolutely, yeah.
So the idea behind this guideline is that no organization can succeed by itself. That the competition in today's reality is going to be not a company against a company, but a company and its network against another company in its network. It's really network against network. And we did a study that we published it about 2 years ago on network orchestration. And we looked at 4 different business models. We looked at asset builders, like manufacturers or retailers. We look at service providers like consulting firms. We look at technology creators like software developers or even pharmaceutical companies that develop IP. And then we looked at network orchestrators, those who orchestrate a network like Google or Airbnb and others. And then we looked in terms of what is the result, what is the market value of these companies. So this is based on all publicly traded companies. What is the market value as a multiple of revenue, not a profit, of revenue? And the chart shows you the results. Asset builders were about 2x, service provider 3x, technology creator 5x, but network orchestrators were like 8x plus. There's a very small group of network orchestrators out there. But every company, regardless of your business model, you have a network of customers, of suppliers, of partners, of others. The challenge you have is, how do you energize, how do you leverage the network that you have to try to create value? And the idea will be for every one of you, every one of the listeners, to ask yourself, who are the members of the networks that you have? Current customers, prior customers, suppliers, distributors, others involved that you're using, and can you leverage them to create an effective network? And now it's the time to do it. Now it's the time to try to leverage them. And this will go hand in hand with what we discussed in the previous guideline of trying to engage effectively the stakeholder you're dealing with. So if we can move to the next slide, please. This is actually something we discussed before, so we can go over it pretty fast. This is the idea that we have to ensure that organizational agility and resilience is there. And in order to do it, I have to enhance the culture and the organizational architecture. And you have here graphically all the items I described before in response to the question of agility. So if I want to be agile, if I want to be resilient, I have to start by basically focusing on the culture and values, but then work around the clock here on the other items we have here in terms of all the way to actually going counterclockwise in terms of the structure and governance, the process, the people and competencies, facilities, resources, technology, and performance measures and incentives. And they will, by making sure that all of them are geared toward how do we make better, faster decisions, how can we move fast, and how can we increase our resilience. We can move to the next slide, please. Yeah, let me actually go back for a minute, if we can, for the previous slide. There's one very important dimension that I want to emphasize here. And this is that one of the obstacles for agility for many organizations is that most organizations are built on silos. Consumers are expecting a seamless experience with a company. Companies, on the other hand, because of the historical way in which companies were designed and structured, they're built around silos. So a consumer that depends on output from multiple silos is not going to get a seamless experience. It's going to get basically a chopped up experience based on the experience of each one of the silos. So an absolute condition that we have to have here is to rethink how do we bridge the silos and create this seamless experience in this new world that requires really omni-channel. You have to have, everything has to be done seamlessly offline and online. How do you deliver it through the entire organization so you maximize the value for the consumer? So we can move to the next item, please. So here the idea is, let's re-examine the business models and operations in order both to increase the efficiency of what we're doing and also to challenge the current revenue models and identify new opportunities for profitable growth. So there are two aspects for this. In time of crisis, cash is king. How can you generate cash? What can you do to reduce fixed costs? What can you do to eliminate inefficiency? Eliminate redundancies? My experience over the years suggests that if you are going to re-examine everything you do and follow the rule I mentioned before, are we doing the right things right? You'll be able, if you're a legacy organization, to save at least 20% of your operating budget by eliminating redundancies, by increasing efficiencies, by firing ineffective people and the like. This is the way in which you can generate enough cash to try to cover some of the more innovative initiatives to experiment with the other item I'm suggesting. But at the same time, let's also look at the revenue side and ask the question, what else can you do? Is this an opportunity to change revenue models? Can you increase your revenue? What else can you do, both short-term as well as long-term? And if we can turn to the last slide. The last slide emphasizes again the innovation, the need for innovation by everyone, and the need to adopt adaptive experimentation approach. So let me explain why adaptive experimentation, why is it so critical? The only way in which you can establish whether there is a causal link between what you do and the result is through experimentation. Everything else is giving you some correlations. But if you really want to understand the causal link, you have to experiment. So imagine if I'm going to advertise $1 million of advertising, and I'm getting some results at the end of the period. What should I do next? Should I increase, decrease, or keep the same level of advertising? There is no way you can answer this question. We don't know. The only way in which you can know if to increase, decrease, or keep the level of advertising as it is if you'll take the $1 million and allocate it in different markets at different levels. So in some markets, you'll allocate this at the level of $2 million, in some markets at the level of 1 million, in some markets you'll allocate at the level of $500,000, and run the experiment and see what happens. And based on this, you can decide what will be the level of advertising. If you're finding no difference among them, obviously this is information. Any outcome you get from the experiment is valuable information. Experimentation is key. Everyone knows that not every experiment will succeed. So the minute you are promoting experimentation, and adaptive experimentation means continuous experimentation. It's not only like a one little pilot test I'm doing, but continuously experimenting with everything I do. It suggests that you are accepting and encouraging everyone in the organization to go outside their comfort zone, not only to continue doing what they're doing, but to experiment with new innovative things that may not succeed. Because you're sending a message, it is okay to fail. Because everyone knows not every experiment will succeed. So if it's okay to fail, let's celebrate lessons from failure as much as we celebrate successes. And if we are accepting the adaptive experimentation approach, you're also sending an amazing signal out there that we have a creative culture. So going back to the old question in terms of how do we encourage employees to try to be more innovative? Well, the best way of doing it is by encouraging them to experiment, by requiring every unit when they're presenting the annual budget to suggest what are the experiments they're going to run. This also will help you deal with the talent issue, because the more experimental you are as an organization, the higher the likelihood you'll be able to attract more talented people who are willing to take risk and experiment. Keep in mind that all the big name companies, the tech companies, the Google, the Facebook, the Amazon, they are continuously experimenting. There's not one decision they make without continuous experimentation. So the requirement now, if you want really to succeed and capture the opportunities in time of crisis, experiment, experiment, experiment. And at the same time, not only initiate experiment, but have your eyes open to look for natural experiments that are happening in the marketplace. Because of the unique situation, there are a lot of natural experiments happening out there. What can we learn from them? So in order to try to implement the 10 ideas I'm suggesting here, key for them is the last one, to create this environment of innovation, adaptive experimentation, encourage everyone to try to experiment with some of the ideas we discussed this afternoon. Let me stop here. If we can turn to the next page, which will show hopefully the list of all of the 10, and then let's listen to any additional questions you have. And then especially if you have any questions concerning how can I implement this, or if you disagree with any of them, bring it up, or if there are other things that you think will help you generate opportunities in this time of crisis, bring it up and let's discuss it.
Thank you so much, Jerry. I think there are a lot of questions sort of flowing in. So let me start with the first one. This question comes from Amit. If we re-examine for profitable growth and are seeing good growth with many people working from home, how do we even identify or justify whether we have excess manpower? So I think his question is about excess workforce effectively. I mean, once we are sort of doing this entire thing. So that's, I think, his question, Amit's question.
I think it's a great question. I think you should pursue it. You should ask yourself the question, do I really need all the people I have? You know, are all the functions, this goes directly along the line of, are we doing the right things right? You know, are there things I do today we won't need to? Are there things that I can use open innovation for them and I don't have my own talent? Remember, 4x and 8x improvement in cost and speed compared to internal people. So can I change some of my talent policy, and instead of just hiring people, use more open innovation? Can I automate some of the functions? Can I eliminate some of the functions? Absolutely the right questions. You know, the key is ask the question, explore it, and act on it, and not just accept that whatever talent I had before and manpower, this is what I have to have.
Thank you so much, Jerry. We have quite a few questions. I mean, how can we evaluate whether the employees are connected with organization? And if company is doing well, let us say through COVID, without anyone coming to office, again, that's the same question, I think. Would you expect the shift from shareholder to stakeholder focus to drive a shift away from short-term results towards long-term results? If it seems one of the ills of the current shareholder focus is targeting short-term results, do you think these times will force companies to think more long-term?
Great two questions. So let me answer the first one first, which is the notion of how to know if the employees are communicating effectively or not. I think the way to do it is by either informally interacting with customers and finding out their reaction, how they are, making sure we are in contact with them, make sure that we're sending out any message is relevant and respectful of them, and not just sending all junk that I have in terms of just standard message. And I can also do it more systematic. I can do surveys. Net Promoter Score, when we ask people to evaluate, would they recommend the company to others on a 10-point scale? is pretty standard, very easy to complete, can be done by even by phone or internet, and can provide you continuous information of how well you're doing. Especially if you follow the question, would you recommend the company to a friend? If you follow it with a question of why, and you get the answers of those who are the promoter, those who say 9 or 10, versus those who are detractors, those who give it a score of 1 to 6. So I think there are a number of ways, but one is by just interacting with them all the time, being in touch with them, or conducting some surveys. If you are the CEO of your company or in charge of clients, make sure that you're continuously in touch with your clients. Don't abandon them. Now's the time to call them, find out, how are you doing? Is there anything I can do to help? I think that's two simple questions. How are you doing? And is there anything I can do to help? If you do this with every one of your clients, you'll score enormous kind of credit. And then look around outside your industry. Look what everyone else is doing in terms of trying to engage customer and see which of these things apply. I would highly recommend to look at some of the stuff that some of the art and cultural institutions are doing, because some of them are really doing amazing job in linking with their audiences. The second question in terms of short-term versus long-term orientation, I really hope so. I really hope that they move away from narrow shareholder requirement, which theoretically should focus on maximizing long-term shareholder value. Unfortunately, became to a very short-term orientation. And I would suggest two things in this respect to do. One is follow carefully what's happening in terms of the B Corporation, follow what's happening with some of the more enlightened pension funds that are definitely taking a longer term orientation. And then if you're a public company, make sure to be selective as to who your shareholders are. You as a, if you are running a company, you have a power to try through your presentation, shareholder presentation and the like, to try to select investors who will invest in you, as opposed to just be at the mercy of the market. So take a more active role to try to identify who do you want to be your owners. Related to this, and part of the stakeholder focus, is the whole increased move toward ESG, or toward conscious, kind of more conscious capitalism or responsible investing, or the ESG, which is environment, sustainability, and governance. And there are some fascinating studies that show that portfolios of companies who all meet the ESG requirement perform as well as portfolios without this constraint. So in a sense, to try to do well and to try to have a positive impact, you're not sacrificing returns. A portfolio of ESG stock can do as well as another portfolio without this constraint.
Thank you, Jerry. I think we are pretty much on time. Thank you very much. I know we still have to. I'll probably sort of request Jerry for some separate questions. I'll email it to him. I'll sort of get back to the very specific people who have asked, just because of the lack of time or shortage of time, because this is just so engaging. We could have gone in for a pretty much a full day, Jerry. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thanks to everyone for joining in. I think Jerry had some assignments for you as well. So I don't know, Jerry, I will just sort of use this slide as a backdrop.
Yeah. I'm glad you're putting it on, because I think the real value of a session like this is not that you nod your head and say, yes, I agree, or I don't agree. The real value is reflecting on this and saying, okay, so we heard about 10 opportunities, and you had plenty of time to look at the previous slide that summarized them, and select one of them. And so, okay, this really sounds intriguing. How can I design an experiment to try to test it, to see if it's working or not? And then ideally, if you want to, report back to the group or to the company in terms of what you've done, and perhaps create a whole kind of network among the participants in this session, the report. But I think the key is item 1. Select at least one area of the 10 areas we discussed. And if you can move to the previous slide, just have it for so people can see that the 10 area, and just select one and start doing something about it. Because not doing it and just focusing on the current crisis without building toward the future will hurt you long term. So it's a unique opportunity. It's an amazing time to try to change what you're doing and have a better impact and better result, and ideally on all stakeholders and society. And it will take seriously the current crisis, the second virus that we're dealing with, and we'll be able to change our values and start taking some actions that are going to lead to reduction of racism and bigotry and other hatred in society. I think that will be all by far better off. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. And if you have any other questions, I'll be glad to respond to them.
Thank you so much for joining us. It was an engaging session as always with Jerry. Jerry, thank you very much on the behalf of the entire NetElixir family. And everyone, please stay safe, stay healthy, and as Jerry says, enjoy designing your future. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.